There is something deeply unsettling, yet strangely magnetic about the allure of serial killers. Despite their gruesome acts and horrifying legacies, many of them continue to captivate the public's imagination, not merely through sensational headlines, but through an inexplicable fascination that borders on admiration. This phenomenon is neither rare nor new. Figures like Ted Bundy, who confessed to the murder of over 30 women, received fan mail in prison and even proposals of marriage. Others like Richard Ramirez, dubbed the Night Stalker, garnered legions of female admirers who romanticized his violence. This paradox, evil wrapped in charm, poses an unsettling question. Why are we, as a society, so drawn to individuals who represent the darkest aspects of human nature? Is this allure a form of psychological malfunction, or could it be a reflection of something intrinsic within the human psyche? Carl Jung once wrote, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people." Perhaps then, our fascination is less about the killer himself and more about confronting the shadows within. As we begin to untangle this web of seduction, fear, and psychology, it becomes evident that the appeal of the serial killer lies not only in their ability to commit unthinkable crimes, but in their uncanny capacity to appear, even momentarily, as if they were one of us. Popular culture has long been enamored with villains, not as faceless embodiments of evil, but as complex figures wrapped in charisma, intelligence, and often a tragic backstory. In television and film, the serial killer has evolved from a monstrous aberration into a figure of intrigue and psychological depth. Characters such as Hannibal Lecter, Joe Goldberg from You, and Dexter Morgan have not only captivated audiences, but invited them to empathize, even root for, men who kill with method and purpose. These portrayals reflect a cultural shift. The villain is no longer the other, but someone frighteningly familiar. With each episode, the boundaries between justice and vengeance, madness and method, become increasingly blurred. This phenomenon speaks to a broader psychological truth. Viewers are not just passive observers. They become psychologically entangled in the emotional narratives of these characters. The more nuanced the villain, the easier it becomes to identify with his struggle, his pain, his need for control. According to psychologist Carl Rogers, what is most personal is most universal. Audiences connect not to the violence, but to the vulnerability, to the existential desperation that underlies the killer's facade. These characters offer a mirror, albeit a cracked and disturbing one, into the human experience, making their darkness feel strangely relatable. Moreover, the storytelling structure itself often primes empathy. Modern narratives tend to focus on the villain's point of view, offering access to their inner monologue, their reasoning, even their remorse. This manipulates emotional alignment and challenges the moral compass of the audience. The effect is subtle, yet profound. When given context, even the most heinous acts begin to appear justifiable. This cognitive dissonance is not accidental. It is designed to seduce. As psychologist Philip Zimbardo observed, evil is knowing better, but willingly doing worse. Pop culture capitalizes on this tension, constructing villains who are not evil in the abstract, but heartbreakingly human in their descent. In essence, the villain's charm in media is not merely a narrative device. It is a psychological seduction. It invites viewers to question the rigidity of their morality, to walk in forbidden shoes, and to taste the thrill of power without consequence. What begins as entertainment becomes a quiet confession. Within each of us lies a curiosity for the forbidden, and the villain simply gives that curiosity a face, a voice, and, most seductively, a motive. Beyond the veil of fiction lies a disturbing truth. Many real-life serial killers exhibit a chilling kind of charm that enables them to seduce, manipulate, and ultimately destroy. This is not cinematic embellishment, but a recurring psychological profile confirmed by decades of forensic research. Ted Bundy remains the quintessential example, a man whose polished demeanor, legal knowledge, and seemingly gentle presence masked a predatory mind. Women describe him as intelligent, witty, even kind. Yet he confessed to brutally murdering dozens of them. His case forces a reckoning with the uncomfortable idea that charm, far from being a sign of goodness, can be a predator's most lethal disguise. Psychologically, this charm is not accidental. It is often the surface manifestation of deeper, darker traits that comprise what researchers call the dark triad of personality: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. These traits, when expressed in tandem, create individuals who are egocentric, manipulative, and emotionally detached, yet often socially adept. According to Delroy Paulhus and Kevin Williams, who first coined the term, individuals high in dark triad traits are disproportionately skilled in impression management. They know what to say, how to say it, and when to smile, even while planning acts of cruelty. Their interpersonal intelligence is weaponized. Psychopathy, in particular, is central to this paradox of likability. Psychopaths are often described as glib, superficially charming, and fearless. They display a calmness under pressure, a polished social persona, and a remarkable lack of empathy. Yet this very effect, a steady gaze, controlled speech, and confident body language, can be interpreted as confidence, competence, even magnetism. As psychologist Robert Hare, a leading expert on psychopathy, noted, psychopaths are social predators who charm, manipulate, and ruthlessly plow their way through life, leaving a broad trail of broken hearts, shattered expectations, and empty wallets. Scientific studies corroborate this illusion. A 2015 study by Holtzman and Strube found that individuals with high psychopathy scores were more likely to be rated as physically attractive and charming in short social encounters. The same traits that make them dangerous also make them appealing, particularly in settings where charisma and confidence are misread as indicators of sincerity and strength. The dissonance is jarring. These individuals are emotionally hollow, yet socially magnetic. This is what makes them so deadly. Their charm is not the kind that emerges from compassion or moral integrity, but from an innate understanding of how others think and feel. Insight not for empathy, but for exploitation. It allows them to pass undetected, to be trusted, to be adored, and ultimately to destroy. In this light, the charm of a serial killer is not a contradiction. It is the mask worn by pathology, a smile stretched over a void. To understand why some individuals are drawn to serial killers, it is necessary to look beyond culture and pathology and into the deep architecture of human evolution. Evolutionary psychology offers a compelling, if uncomfortable, framework to explain why certain dark traits might not only persist, but be perceived as attractive. These traits, dominance, risk-taking, fearlessness, were not always liabilities. In early human societies, they may have conferred survival advantages, particularly in the brutal context of competition, defense, and sexual selection. From this perspective, what is seen today as dangerous or psychopathic might have once signaled strength and high status. A man who appeared fearless, who could intimidate rivals or navigate chaos with ease, would have held a certain evolutionary appeal. He could protect, provide, and prevail. Evolutionary psychologist David Buss notes, women's mate preferences are hypothesized to have evolved to solve a series of adaptive problems, including selecting a partner who is able and willing to invest, who is physically able to protect, and who has good genes. In this calculus, traits like boldness, assertiveness, and even aggression could signal genetic fitness, especially in short-term mating contexts where charm and risk-taking are often prioritized over empathy and stability. Compounding this biological inheritance is the phenomenon known as hybristophilia, a condition in which individuals, often women, are sexually or emotionally attracted to people who have committed violent crimes. While still considered rare and controversial, hybristophilia has manifested visibly in modern times, particularly around high-profile cases. Women have written love letters to serial killers on death row, defended their innocence, and even married them. Though easily dismissed as sensational or pathological, this behavior may, in part, be an echo of deep-seated psychological drives shaped by ancestral environments. It is also essential to consider how the human brain interprets emotional arousal. Neurologically, the states of fear and sexual attraction activate overlapping pathways in the limbic system, particularly those involving the amygdala and dopamine release. In certain contexts, this overlap can lead to misattribution of arousal, a well-documented phenomenon in psychology. Arousal induced by fear, such as watching a violent documentary or engaging with the story of a killer, can mistakenly be interpreted as attraction. The danger becomes intoxicating, the boundary between threat and allure increasingly blurred. At the core of these explanations lies the uncomfortable truth that some psychological mechanisms evolved not to serve moral clarity but reproductive success. The charm of a dangerous individual can trigger primal responses that bypass reason. As psychologist Steven Pinker observed, our minds are shaped not just to solve problems, but to win evolutionary contests. In that contest, the capacity to command attention, dominate rivals, and seduce with confidence, even if rooted in darkness, can exert a powerful gravitational pull. In this light, the appeal of the serial killer is not merely a cultural aberration or moral failure, but a convergence of ancient instincts and modern distortions. It is what happens when prehistoric wiring meets the spectacle of violence, and when fear is mistaken for fascination. Beneath the surface of horror lies a primitive recognition. This is someone who possesses the power to break rules, wield dominance, and provoke desire, even if that desire is born of terror. If the allure of the serial killer is rooted in both biological instinct and psychological seduction, then the greatest risk is not fascination itself, but the failure to distinguish between appearance and essence, between charisma and character. This confusion is not a trivial oversight, it is a critical vulnerability in human judgment. History, relationships, and even politics offer countless examples of individuals who weaponize charm to conceal their intentions, manipulating others with ease while harboring malice beneath the surface. Charm, in this context, becomes a tool of exploitation. It mimics sincerity, mimics warmth, and mimics empathy, but it is hollow. Psychologist Martha Stout, in her study of sociopathy, emphasized, the most reliable sign, the most universal behavior of a sociopath is not a lack of remorse, it is the manipulation of others by charm and seduction. In other words, charm is not proof of goodness. It is merely a performance, and the better the performance, the more dangerous the actor behind it. The danger is especially acute for those who are emotionally vulnerable, those with a history of trauma, abandonment, or low self-worth. These individuals may be particularly susceptible to the seductive qualities of a person who appears strong, decisive, or confident. In the context of a romantic or personal relationship, such charm can quickly become a gateway to psychological entrapment. The predator does not arrive with fangs and fury, but with a warm voice, attentive eyes, and what appears to be understanding. What follows is not just betrayal, it is a dismantling of the victim's sense of reality. This dynamic is amplified by cultural narratives that romanticize emotional damage as depth and darkness as mystery. Popular tropes encourage the idea that the bad boy can be saved, that the wounded man simply needs love to heal. Such notions, while seductive, are profoundly dangerous when applied to individuals with antisocial or psychopathic traits. As psychologist Sandra Brown warns in her work on pathological relationships, these individuals do not bond. They mimic bonding. What you experience is not connection, it is manipulation designed to look like love. What makes this deception so devastating is not simply the violence that may follow, but the self-doubt it seeds. Victims of manipulative charm often question their own perceptions, wondering how someone so captivating could also be so cruel. This cognitive dissonance erodes trust, not only in others, but in oneself. It leaves scars that extend beyond the relationship, shaping how victims engage with intimacy, confidence, and vulnerability for years to come. The broader cultural implication is equally troubling. When society glamorizes the charming killer, it sends a subtle but powerful message that charisma exonerates, that a pretty face or a polished speech somehow mitigates violence. This is the illusion most dangerous of all, not because it makes us love evil, but because it numbs our capacity to recognize it. The antidote to this confusion is discernment. It is the ability to differentiate between what is merely compelling and what is genuinely trustworthy. As Carl Jung warned, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. That journey requires us not only to confront the shadows within ourselves, but to see clearly the shadows in others, no matter how brightly they smile. The charm of the serial killer is not an illusion born of madness, nor is it a mere trick of cinematic narrative. It is, instead, a reflection, a mirror held up to the human psyche, exposing the shadows we are taught to suppress. What captivates us is not the killer's cruelty, but his capacity to wear a human mask so convincingly that it destabilizes our moral compass. The tension lies not in their monstrosity, but in their normalcy, their ability to mimic what is desirable, admirable, even lovable. This paradox is what makes them terrifying and fascinating. To confront this fascination is to reckon with what psychologist Carl Jung called the shadow self, that hidden part of our personality that contains all we refuse to acknowledge: aggression, desire for control, a hunger for chaos. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." In this sense, the serial killer becomes more than a figure of fear. He becomes a symbol of the psychic battle each person faces between repression and revelation. When society gazes upon the killer, it is not just looking at a man, it is looking at what happens when the shadow is not integrated, but allowed to dominate. But this fascination is not in itself a flaw. It is an invitation to examine, not romanticize. To ask, why does danger stimulate desire? Why does dominance masquerade so easily as charisma? And most importantly, why does evil sometimes wear the face of someone we think we could love? These questions are not meant to indict, but to illuminate. They reveal the fragility of human perception, the dangers of our assumptions, and the complexity of our emotional wiring. Ultimately, the answer to why serial killers can appear charming lies not just in their psychology, but in ours. Their ability to manipulate rests on our willingness to trust appearances, to equate surface with substance. In unmasking them, we unmask ourselves, not to find guilt, but to reclaim discernment. So perhaps the lesson is this, that in every smile there is a story, and in every story a shadow. It is not charm we must fear, but charm without conscience. Not beauty, but beauty unmoored from empathy. The fascination with the serial killer is not about glorifying death, but about understanding how easily it can be cloaked in the language of love. And in that understanding, we reclaim something far more powerful than fear. We reclaim the clarity to see what lies beneath the mask.